Welcome, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast. I'm your producer and host of the show, Dr. Lino Martinez. This is your motivational podcast of people's incredible journeys. Oh yeah, let's do this. Welcome back, everybody, to the A Little Less Fear podcast, the Dr. Lino Show. I would like to welcome Michael DiPietro and Marcey Donnelly. They're co-authors of the Inside Guide, Breaking Through to Intuitive Wisdom and Inspired Living. For over 20 years, Michael DiPietro has been guiding individuals and groups to overcome obstacles and awaken to authenticity, fulfillment, and life purpose. He has a BS degree in engineering, is a certified master practitioner of Neuro Linguistic programming, a martial arts instructor, skilled bodyworker, meditation teacher, and has spent time in both Buddhist and Benedictine monasteries. Through his extensive training and deep intuition, he guides clients and readers to truly know themselves, to transform challenges, to find meaning, and to live their life purpose. He lives in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm also in California. Welcome, California residents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, this is incredible. Thank you for your time. And you know what? We're very interested in people's journeys. This is a motivational podcast, and I'd like to know what brought you to where you currently are at today.
Great. Well, this journey for me started about 30 years ago. I was living a pretty unconscious life up until about age 30. And then at age 30, I was at a low point and I had a spiritual experience in the desert in Arizona. And that opened my heart up. And from there, I started getting into meditation, into martial arts, into everything that was helping me develop and deal with kind of the dysfunction and pain from my childhood. So I think sometimes a spiritual opening actually is the beginning of our journey, and it really opens us up to a deeper level of consciousness. So once I started working with the tools, I also started to practice and started wanting to be of service to other people. So that developed into a coaching practice and eventually into this spiritual nature of the work that I'm doing now over about a 20-year period. So.
When you went to the desert, what brought you to the desert? Why did you go to Arizona?
Well, there was a calling. It was I was at a pretty I didn't have a lot of direction, and I was coming up on my 30th birthday, and I really didn't know what I was here to do. And so I was feeling pretty lost, I guess I could say. And I just went out, and it was on my 30th birthday, and I just was meditating in this spot in the desert, and it was kind of a presence that showed up. And just my heart burst open and rays of light came from behind the clouds. And it really was just kind of like God showed up for a moment. And it just burst my heart wide open. I started weeping tears of joy, and the clouds started dropping little drops of rain at the same time. And It just like was a flood of joy and love coming through all at once. And we think like that's the pinnacle to reach that, but a lot of times that's the starting point of our journey. That's when the work begins.
But prior to you having this incredible awakening, what were you meditating before?
I was doing nothing. Yeah, I was partying, and I had a kind of wild time in my 20s, and that's probably why I think, I had gone to school for electrical engineering, and I was very driven, but I hit about 27, 28 years old, and I kind of washed out the corporate world. It wasn't really my gig, and I had a different purpose to follow, and I knew something I was destined for, but it really wasn't showing up. And so I just kept on and kind of kept limping along until I got this calling to go to the desert, and that really woke me up. It really was earth-shattering in a way.
Could you describe the calling to go to the desert? What did that feel like?
It's just a hunch, I guess. I think, I've learned as I progressed and I've done a lot more meditation, you learn to listen to the intuitive voice, to the quiet voice.
Mm-hmm.
When we get still, when we get quiet, as you know, there's a lot of intuition that can come through. And so I didn't really know, but I just was like, I just got to get to the desert. And it was just a hunch, and I just followed it. I had a pretty adventurous nature. So I just said yes to it and went there. And thank goodness I did, is all I got to say, because it really was the start of my journey.
And so when you were at the desert at the start of your journey, this was the first time that you meditated?
I wouldn't even say I was meditating. It was more just, I mean, I was sitting there and I was on this rock, and it was my 30th birthday. So I was thinking about my parents and the gift of my life. And I just started walking down from the rock, and it's almost like I walked into something, like there was a beam or something there, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I can't really explain it, but I was flooded in a moment with a loving presence. And
what did you think at that moment when you were being flooded by this?
Oh God,
energy.
I don't think I had much thought. I thought, I didn't know what to make of it, because I didn't have an understanding of experiences like that at the time. And now I've guided lots of people through experiences like that. But I think, the mind can grab a hold of something like that, and we can tell a story about what we think it is, but it's not always accurate, because the love and the presence that's at our center is bigger than our mind can get around sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And when we experience that loving core of who we are, the mind can at times go into delusion around it and make a story about it, and think I'm the next prophet on the planet, which
Right.
Hey, maybe I am, but the mind doesn't need to think that way. That's not
Right.
useful to staying grounded and staying humble and beginning to get beyond our own self-interest in a way. So
Continue through the journey. What happened after the desert? How long were you at the desert?
Oh, it was just a couple of weeks through, and it was a time where a lot of synchronicities were happening. So I was really starting my spiritual journey of listening to the inner guidance. But the real work started when I started meditating and I started the martial arts, and I really started to face my inner demons, a lot of the pain and dysfunction from my childhood that I'd never dealt with. It was 30 years of avoiding all that. So I had a lot of catch up to do. And so most of my 30s, I was doing healing body work, and I started my coaching practice around age 38, and then I got into the neuro-linguistic programming. But for most of my 30s, I was just doing a lot of inner work and a lot of soul searching and a lot of digging and just kind of facing my triggers and really like I was a sponge. I was reading 5 books at a time during my 30s and just really learning as much about spirituality and consciousness as I could. And then in my 40s, the game changed a little bit. It's more about going into your profession and your career. And I was approaching midlife at that point. And so the focus changes a little bit. And it changes again in your 50s and again in your 60s as you go through these chapters of life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just been more, staying on the path, continuing with the work, continuing to reach out, continuing to evolve. At about 48, I kind of left everything. I decided I didn't want to do corporate work anymore. I was doing small business and corporate coaching in San Francisco, and I just burned out on all that. And so I walked away from all of it, and I really wanted to be out in the world in more of a spiritual orientation. And so I took a number of years. I went to the woods. I just kind of zeroed out a lot of things and restarted it under the work I'm doing now, which is really reaching a broader population with a different message. And the message is really that you are your own guide, that there is wisdom inside of you, and that we as much as guides are useful, and I'm a guide in working with other people, the real important message is that you're a guide in your own right, and everyone has wisdom and power and the answers that they seek within themselves. So that's really what I'm trying to point people to at this point is stop looking outside yourself.
I love how you said that you are your own guide. There is wisdom inside you. But prior to you being able to think this way and feel this way, when you were facing your demons in your 30, could you take us through some of those demons that you faced and how you overcame some of those challenges?
Sure. I grew up in a large Italian Catholic family, and we had 7 kids. And a lot of times in families, children will play different roles. So my role was the lost child. And I felt very alone in a large family. And we had a sibling who was special needs, and I was absorbing a lot of the pain and a lot of what wasn't being talked about in the family. So I was kind of the sponge for a lot of that. And it made me very dysfunctional in a lot of ways when I was younger. And what you realize as you begin to face those inner wounds is that there was never anything wrong with me. The healing that I got was that I was caught in the pain of the family. I was caught in a lot of things that had nothing to do with me. And there was a lot of guilt about my own function being in relation to a special needs sibling, right? Mm-hmm. So when you pass that sibling by and you're more functional and healthy than they are, there was a way I was unconsciously holding myself back. Mm-hmm. And so there were just a lot of entanglement with my mother and just her pain and taking on her pain. And so it was very crippling for me. But the healing was that it was never my pain to begin with, and that you can respectfully give that back and send that back to where it was and get back to who you really are. A lot of times the family system will influence us to believe things about ourselves that just aren't true. And we're all adapting from our childhood and doing the best we can.
Right.
But the healing is that you realize we don't have to follow the dictates of what we had to believe to get by in our childhood. We have a choice.
Practice when you were meditating or doing martial arts, or when you're a body worker or practicing Buddhism or monasteries, which of these practices helped you realize this the most? That it was not your fault, that it was family conditioning, and that you are your own individual and have your own energetic field?
I'd say all of them, but this work in particular is from the work of a German therapist called Bert Hellinger. Okay. And he does a type of work called family constellations and family systems. So this approach that I was just talking about is really a family systems approach, which is just another tool in the toolbox that I work with. But I would say all of it. And I think the important thing is to, what I try to guide people to is find the tool that works best for you. Find that there's so many modalities out there, and find the one that really resonates with you as an individual. Because when you try to fit the square peg in the round hole, it doesn't work, right? And
right.
It's really about finding the tools and the methodologies and the path that's really right for you. And again, listening to your own inner guidance about what's right for you and who's right for you, and beginning to follow that. So.
Michael, how can you describe what an inner guidance is to someone that's listening to this terminology for the first time?
When we get very quiet, when meditation is really to still the mind, and contemplation from a Western perspective is to sit with the truth of us in the center of our being, the infinite spaciousness in our heart. You could call it love, right? Just to sit in that loving space that we are. When I talk about inner guide, it's really the wise, intelligent part of ourself that's plugged in to the universe that knows. There's a knowing part of ourself, but a lot of times in our everyday mind, there's too much noise going on in the mind to really hear that voice. So the guidance is there within everyone. The key is to make ourselves still and quiet enough to really listen and sort out all the noise, all the other voices, all the things that are trying to lead us astray, the outer diversions, the cookies in my cabinet, the things that are going to get me off my track, right? So there's distraction in the outer world, and entertainment, TV, internet, all these things that can really distract us from our interior life. The key is to begin to go back internal, to listen, to sort through our thoughts, our feelings, our sensations in our body, and get to a point of stillness where we can begin to hear our own intuitive voice.
I love how you said that, sort through sensations of the body. So how does somebody tell the difference between their inner guidance and a distraction?
Wow, you're just giving me some very easy questions to work with there, Lino.
Oops, sorry about that.
I think it's a matter of subtlety. The inner guide is going to be usually the quietest. It's going to be the most subtle voice in us. An outer distraction is something that, I call it, in the book we talk about in the beginning, attention direction. And these days, everybody wants your attention. Internet, it's all about getting attention, right?
Right.
And social media leverages people's attention. But where is your attention going? Is it going outside yourself to, the latest, greatest movie, or what's this TV show? And there's nothing wrong with those, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But your attention is also meant to go inward. And so when we can turn our attention inward and sort out our feelings and just pay attention to self, right? It's like we're the last to get the attention sometimes, and where the self is the one that needs it the most, because we need to reach that center. We need to reach our loving core. And if we don't turn the attention inward, a lot of times we just get distracted with everyday life. And another part of it is that when we turn the attention inward, sometimes we hit the shadow realm. Sometimes we have to face things that don't feel good internally. Right. And that forces a lot of people to go back out again. It's like, well, I did turn inward and I felt worse. Well, okay, yes. that means you hit something, and that something is to be worked with and cleared. But the truth of you lies deeper than that bad feeling you might have hit, right?
Right. And it seems like a lot of people can be potentially turned off by that. Like, oh, I went deep and then it made me cry and now I don't want to go there. So I mean, how do you get someone to continue on that path? Like, it's okay, you reach something that's actually a light. It's not anything dark. There's something going that's going to take you to a different path if you continue there, a positive path. How do you encourage someone to keep going from there?
Well, when I work with people, we help. That's what I do in a private session with people, is I help them break through that and revise that so that it's not a hindrance anymore. But the important thing is, this is an optional course in life. This has to remain a choice for people. If someone is forced to do that, it's not going to work. It really. And I wait for a lot of people to come to me, because if I try to go out and push someone who's not ready into the work, it never works.
Never.
But there's a timing for people's lives. And when the door opens, that's a really incredible opportunity to transform and to really begin to make a difference that you've been waiting for a long time.
Michael, how do you guide people? I'm sorry, go ahead, Marcey.
No, I was just going to say, as a client going through this work, and that's how I met Michael 5 years ago, was he was referred, and I wasn't quite clear on kind of what the work was, but I've always had the sense that there was something missing, that there was something more I should be doing, that there's this yearning for this place. And I had all of the things that I felt so grateful for: a roof over our head, a job, a family, a good relationship. And so I thought, gosh, I just feel like I've had everything that I've wanted at my core, but what is this hole? What's this? I call it like, I just yearn for something more. And so I got the referral, and I thought, well, I've gone to lots of conferences, and I've tried lots of modalities, and did a lot of meditating and workshops and read books. And I kept looking outside for what that, prescription was essentially. And within the first, 2-hour session with Michael, it hit on a few things. And my first thing I hit on was that there was really nothing broken within me. And I'd always been searching to fix what was going on and what was wrong inside of me. And then once I had my first shift and that first understanding and the first feeling of love and acceptance and curiosity about, my purpose and how, the joy that could be part of my daily life, I didn't want to go back. So, we all have ups and downs, and this isn't, that, suppression where you just pretend that everything is fine when it's not. And we still have ups and downs. But I just wanted to feel more of like the curiosity and of getting to know myself. And I just wanted more. And so once I got that feeling, and once I had, my first little transformation or shift, I thought, you know what, I'm just curious about this work, and I want to continue because that feels so good. And it feels like something is being healed. And so I even mentioned that I can't even think of what was going on in my head 5 years ago. Like, it doesn't even feel like it's part of me anymore. And that's why I continue to, look inside, and it's, and through, contemplation, stillness, meditation, work. Of course, when you write a book, you all of a sudden have lots of opportunity to live the practices. But that's why I just know the place that I'm at now and the skills that I've learned to be able to introspect, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. It's so worth the pain sometimes that you uncover when you see a side of yourself that you're not that accepting of.
Marcey, thanks for sharing. And when you first had your first transformational experience, what were you doing and what brought you to that transformation?
Yeah, in terms of the transformational experience I had with my first session with Michael, it was when he told me that there was nothing broken. And I looked around and I said, you know how many thousands of dollars I spent on and courses and this and that and signing up for this and studying and certifications. And I said, what do you mean nothing's broken? I mean, clearly there's something wrong with me. It's like, there's nothing that needs to be fixed. You are whole and complete. Now there's things that you've gone through, and there's coping mechanisms that you've developed through your life that drive this yearning to fix things. And so I started getting curious about like, what's me versus my conditioning. And that's really fascinating because I'm somebody who's naturally organized, but the shadow side of organization is chaos. So when my world is chaotic, I could see it and accept to say, instead of yelling at people to put stuff away, I can say, you know what, there's that chaos that's complementary to my organization. And I am chaotic inside, and it's okay for things to be chaotic around me once in a while. But naturally, I don't have to work on being organized. I'm naturally organized. And so that pressure just was lifted off, and just continuing to peel back those layers have really been empowering. And that's when the mystical stuff starts showing up, which is amazing. The synchronicity, the flow, when you wake up with like an excitement for life. And that's, we call it like the mountaintop energy, but living it in your day-to-day life. Yeah. You have those mountaintop experiences where everything seems peaceful and love, and you feel connection. But how do you bring that energy into your daily life? How do you live wellness as a verb and not as a destination?
I love that. Well, how do you live wellness as a verb and not a destination?
It's this practice. I don't know, Michael.
It's wellness is, there's certain words, they're called nominalization, and we try to turn them into something we can grab onto. But something like wellness, it's a flowing state. It's a state of mind, really, a state of heart. And it's really, are we living in a well way, right? And it's not something that you can grab at. It's very intangible, right?
Right.
But like it comes down to every moment. Like, what am I doing each moment? Do I grab for a soda or do I grab for a glass of water?
Exactly.
And I don't like soda, so it's easy choice for me. But like today I was getting a little cloudy in my head. I was on the computer too much. So wellness said, hey, I'm going to go for a little walk outside. And I just sat on the lawn for a little while under the shade of a tree and just sat there and watched little rabbit ran by. And, that was a wellness moment for me. And it just, anything we can do that helps us foster an inner sense of well-being, right? Because it's an inside job. Wellness is not going to show up just because I have a certain house or a certain car or a certain lifestyle. It's a feeling from inside of us, and it's how we express that in our lives.
I love that word. When I first started I'm going to say this, the healing journey, because I completely changed that term. I came to this realization. I was like, you know what? If I keep saying I'm a healing journey, I'm always going to be healing. I'm going to change this to wellness. I'm on a wellness journey. And ever since then, I'm well now, So a lot of the times you have to change the terminology to have your brain understand this new vibration and just ride that wave.
Yeah. Wellness is really the way to go, because healing is nice because it relates to wholeness. But just like you said, a lot of the language we use is really important in terms of how we program ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. Something the both of you mentioned earlier was the word synchronicities. What is a synchronicity?
Well, synchronicity.
I'd like to hear it from you, and then you're an example of synchronicity for you, and then from Marcey as well.
Okay. Synchronicity was originally termed by Carl Jung, and it's a term when we get kind of a spiritual message by things coming in more than one channel. Like I hear about a certain book, and then 3 hours later, I bump into someone who mentions it in the same book to me, right? And so it's synchronous, and it's a way that we start to get messages on a different order of reality. There's a spiritual order and a spiritual nature to things, but again, in the busyness of our mind, we're not privy to a lot of that. And so there's a type of spiritual experience as we begin to open up and we begin to get more clear, where we get guided, we get messages, and sometimes those messages are coming. It's all coming from the inside, but sometimes it's delivered by someone on the outside, and sometimes in multiple ways at the same time. And I think it dovetails into providence a little bit, and just kind of along the same lines as the wellness too. But it's synchronicity is when messages and things are showing up that guide us in a certain direction, or to me, like they're an affirmation that I'm walking my path correctly, that I'm right where I should be.
So what is the difference, or is there a difference between a coincidence and a synchronicity?
So I think synchronicity is when there's meaning associated to it at a different order, on that spiritual order, whereas a coincidence is just what it is, a coincidence, right? And so you're not taking, it could be that the coincidence and the synchronicity are the same thing, but I think the difference would be the synchronicity is when I take that meaning and I see that I'm being guided on this different spiritual order. Whereas a coincidence, I'd be like, oh, that was an interesting coincidence, but I'm not really getting much out of the fact that there was a coincidence.
So coincidence is kind of more like a surface.
I would say it's the same thing, but it's the meaning that, am I paying attention to the coincidence? Mm-hmm. So a coincidence can happen, and I just don't pay attention to it. Oh, that was interesting. But in a synchronicity, it's still a coincidence, but suddenly I'm like, oh, wait, I've been asking that question, and that answer came to me twice today. And I start exploring it, and suddenly I'm down a certain path, and it's giving me the answer I've been seeking. Right. So that it just, to me, the synchronicity has a different order, and it really has to do with, are we paying attention or not?
So, for example, we both practice Buddhism. Would you say that's a coincidence or synchronicity?
I would say that's a coincidence because it doesn't personally, I already practice Buddhism, so I don't need to be affirmed in that.
Yeah.
Right.
I had once heard that coincidence is, if you think of lines coinciding, that it's not chaotic, it's two lines that actually connect. So while coincidence seems random, if you look at, mathematically, two lines coinciding, they actually connect. And I have silly coincidences or synchronicities that happen. Like recently I was checking into a hotel and they had asked for my license plate number. And at the same time, I get a text from my husband saying, I need your license plate number because I'm, filling out paperwork. And I kind of laughed, and it's like, okay, that's kind of silly, a coincidence, but I happened to be at a hotel where I was going to do some self-care and meeting with friends. And to me, it's just spirit reaffirming, like, you're at the right place. Because like I said, 5-10 years ago, I would never have taken a, downtime. I would have, to go away to take care of myself.
Yeah.
So even though it's kind of silly and we kind of laugh and I'm like, gosh, that's so weird. It just to me is like spirit saying, hey, you're at the right place. Like, check mark, we're checking in.
I love that. I like how you kind of brought that to mathematics, because it totally makes sense. They're crossing each other.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're crossing each other, then a coincidence can potentially lead to synchronicities.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think so.
That totally makes sense.
It could just be a matter of semantics too. I don't
Right.
I don't know the definitions well enough to really answer that. But maybe they're the same thing. Maybe it's just the word we use.
Or the feeling that we put with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about your book. What made you want to write a book?
Well, there's been a book in there for a number of years. Like I said, I've been doing this work, and I had a lot of tools in my toolbox. But truth be known, here's the big reveal. I'm not a very good writer.
Okay, that's all right.
So I resisted writing a book for a long time because it involved writing. And 2 years ago, I got this almost like a download. It was an inspiration, and the whole outline for the book came through in about an hour. And I just got some big sheets and I wrote the whole thing down and just got it all down. Marcey laughs because she still has pictures of those original sheets, and she's like, what are these things? They're ridiculous.
They're completely illegible.
But it gave us the framework for the book. And then I knew I needed someone to work with, because I really needed someone to talk to. And we got an app called Otter, and it's a transcription app. And so we were able to start conversations, and this app would transcribe the conversation into text, and we'd take the text and have something to work with, and then they could edit that very easily and then put it into the outline. And so we just started this process of these weekly conversations and editing the text. And through that process, we were doing about 15 to 20 pages a week. And so we got the book, written
Right.
fairly easily through that process. But there's two things about it. I think one, that I could speak to someone when I'm sitting at a blank screen, there's really nothing that comes through for me. So I have a hard time. But because I was talking to Marcey, I was able to talk to someone the way I'm talking to you, the way I'm talking to your audience right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the information came through. And then in addition, because Marcey and I have this amazing collaboration, she was drawing out this whole other level of, like, I would have this abstract concept, and then she would say, well, how does that apply to your life? And she would ask these more practical, grounded questions. So it really drew a whole nother element out of the book, and gave us a broader reach. So it has my concepts and my tools, but it also has a lot of Marcey's practicality and Marcey's organization in there as well. So it was through that collaboration that I feel like we nailed gold, because doing this by myself, it wouldn't be nearly as good as it came out by the both of us doing it together.
That's awesome. M&M's, Michael and Marcey.
I know,
Yeah,
MDMD actually.
Wow, that's true. MDMD.
Right?
Oh my goodness. Hey, is that a coincidence?
It's a synchronistic moment.
It is.
One of the person who gave us a recommendation is Cyprian Concilio. He's an abbot at a monastery in Big Sur, and he called us doctors of the soul, MD.
MDMDs. Yeah. Wow, I love it.
So cool.
So the inside book, Breaking Through to Intuitive Wisdom and Inspired Living. And what type, I mean, is this, it's like a self-help book? Are there is it a process, or is there a goal at the end of the book? Take us through some of the pages of the book or chapters.
It's a self-help book, but it's really written very different. It's a book that is self-directed, and we use a lot of the inquiry process. So we're not giving advice. Even when I work with people, I'm never giving advice or telling them what to do. What I'm doing is asking really good questions that get people to discover for themselves what their own answers are. And that's what this book is about. It's a guide. It's called the Inside Guide. And it's really a way for people to take the journey and have a roadmap to do that. But it's, one of the people who wrote a review said this is not like a self-help book because it's not preachy in any way. And we're not preaching anything here. All we're doing is saying, hey, you're a person in your own right, and you have a process, and we can guide you in that process. But start to take that inward glance, start to go through that process. So in the first part of the book, we're really bringing people through the labyrinth of the mind and how to navigate the need to find answers and the need of the mind to know. And ultimately, we're living in a mystery that's unknown for all of us, right?
Sure.
And it's unfolding, but the mind wants to know all the time. It wants to have the answers.
It does.
And then in the second part of the book, we're teaching people how the mind creates your reality, and how obstacles, whatever obstacles we have, can be overcome by a process of understanding how to reroute neural pathways. The obstacles people face are all an internal orientation. So everything in our lives is getting projected from within us, from within our minds. And so a lot of that is unconscious content. And so we take the second section also through the body, through your physiology, and how the brain is working at this level of physiology to create your reality.
I love that. That's incredible. And is that how you help your clients?
That's pretty much the essence of it, is understanding sensory-based information. So when we have an obstacle, when we have, or we even, if we want to create something new in our life, it doesn't always have to be problem-oriented, right? It can be, hey, I want to have this great new thing in my life. We have to understand that it's a neural pathway in the brain. And the brain runs on sensory-based information. So just like we see and hear our senses externally, our senses also work internally. And so that's how people process. We either process visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically through our feelings, olfactory, and taste, right? So these senses work internally and create inner reference points and inner programs that give rise to the experiences that we have. And when you can start, there's a number of exercises we can do. So what we start to do is elicit how someone is doing what they're doing. This is directly from the field of neuro-linguistic programming. And so when we have those markers, we can start to say, okay, I want to create a new program, or I want to deconstruct a program that's getting in the way. And this is basically like the code that allows us to be able to do that.
I love that, understanding sensory-based information. And it seems like you can, when you're understanding the sensory-based information, the neurobiological portion, you're able to also have like a full human, and then at the same time, like inner spiritual awareness. So it's like you're combining both of them.
Very much so. That's a beautifully said. I like that way of approaching it. And sometimes that's what I'm doing when I'm working. My consciousness is tending to two parts. It's tending to the infinite part of the human being, and to the human part of the person I'm talking to. They're who do they think they are, and what is their individuality, and then who are they in this expansive place and in their greatness, and how do they fit? How do we each fit into the bigger picture of that? So
Yeah, how are they
that's a really
individual and at the same time whole?
And that
Yeah.
actually,
I'm sorry.
oh, I was going to say, Michael, that I know you're going to part 3 because the book is organized into 3 sections: mind, body, and the last part is spirit. And we've talked a lot about that's called the Inside Guide, because there's so much interior work to do, and analysis, and observing and sitting with what's going on inside of your mind and your body. But then when you get to that place of love and connection is really when we kind of project that love out into the world. And that's really the intention for this work, is how could we heal ourselves and live our life purpose with all of our tools and talents and abilities, and bring that out into the world, because we're so we're so disruptive by so much change, instability, social media, what somebody else is doing, what are we missing out on? We're so externally aware that is there a way to reconnect on our gold, as we call it in the book, like our magic, and then bring that out into the world and start building that community of connected people that will do amazing things.
Love how you said that. So your gold, your magic, meaning your inner being.
Yeah.
So the process is, you're going to turn your attention inward. You're going to go through the labyrinth of the mind, through that shadow stuff, and eventually you reach your spiritual core, the mystical space, the place of peace and love within yourself. When you reach that center, that's as far as you can go, right? And maybe we have to kind of learn that journey and how to do that. But then once we want to live our purpose in the world, it's about coming out from that place of love out into the world and letting that center express. We no longer need the mask at that point. We can really show up more authentically at that point, because there's nothing to hide. We found what we're looking for.
Exactly.
Right. And that's the key, is to really reach that center and then say, okay, now how does that come out into the world? So that's the irony of part 3, the mystical part, because the whole book is getting people internally. But then in the third part, we talk about purpose and living your purpose in the world, which is actually getting back out in the world again.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful. I love how you put it all together. And as you were saying this, I was thinking too, that because I mean, I've had some people in my life that are not quote unquote spiritual. And I'm wondering, like, how would you connect your clients if they're adamant on just keeping things on the mind body level and not wanting to go mind, body, and spirit? Like, how do you bring spirit into that, or even that terminology, to someone that's not open to it?
I wouldn't, if it doesn't resonate with the person I'm talking to, right? Because everyone's different and everyone's going to have a different experience, but we can still be of value. And maybe we don't use the word spirit. Maybe it's just getting to a place of stillness within yourself, or getting, so again, the terminology is not important. And I'll use different language depending on who I'm talking to. So, if I'm talking to a Christian, I'm going to talk about Christ. If I'm talking to a Buddhist, I'm going to talk about emptiness and sunyata, so it's different language. But if I'm talking to someone who is not spiritually oriented, I have one client who is atheist, and so I don't use spiritual terminology with her at all, right? Because it doesn't relate to her. But she still gets a lot of value by understanding neurology and reprogramming and having a better experience. And she's actually, over the time we've been working together for five years, we've known each other, we've become friends. She's actually come around to some of, she's all, when I use spirit, I'm like, oops, I used the spirit word. And she's like, it's okay. It doesn't matter anymore. I get it.
Yeah. That's awesome. What makes you
But
so
yeah,
passionate
it's
about
it's
this?
really different for everyone. So we want to honor the uniqueness of every human being. We want to
Absolutely,
honor
and that's what
that
makes it
there's
a
no
beautiful
right or
journey.
wrong way to do this thing called life.
All our uniqueness is really what actually makes us one whole, and that's what's the most beautiful thing about everybody's individuality. Michael, what makes you so passionate about this?
It's the way I was born.
Yeah.
It's
Well enough said. Well said.
I'm wired this way, and it's, when I was younger, I thought I had a lot of problems, and I was sensitive and I was different, and really there was never anything wrong. It was just different, and I had an orientation to be this way, and it wasn't recognized, and I thought I had a lot of wounds around that, but the wound is the gift. And so
Yeah.
when you realize that the place we think we're wounded is actually our gift and what we're passionate about in life, things flip around. And so I'm wired this way, and I made a career out of it, and it makes it so easy because I'm never doing work. I'm doing something I love, right? And that's the key to living in purpose, is you really find something you're passionate about, find those places in your life where you're just naturally wired that way. And everyone fits in somehow. Everyone has some gift to share in the greater unity.
I love how you said this. The key to living on purpose is doing what you love, naturally wired. That's incredible. Thanks for saying that.
And that's inspired. Yes. We talk about in our subtitle inspired, and that's living in spirit. And so I love the word inspired. It's just right, like because it's, as mentioned, it's one thing to have this connection and this feeling when we're in a workshop or when we're reading a book, but to actually find a way and to clear and understand yourself well enough so that you can live that day to day is a gift, and it makes life a joy to live. And it doesn't mean that people won't cut you off in traffic or a bad day now and again. It still happens. But to feel like you're living like this inspired life, that you're connected to your spirit, your identity, whatever you want to call it, is just, and it's affecting the people around us. Even though it's our internal work, it changes how we communicate, how we take care of each other. And hopefully eventually, we'll get into our communities and continue to spread. That's my wish.
Well, it's happening, and I can see it, and I can feel it.
People say, how do you do this work all day long with people? And like, isn't it draining listening and getting this deep with people? And I'm like, no, man, that's so energizing. What's draining is having to go to a party and talk about and do small talk. Like, that's really challenging.
Right.
So I can go really deep all day long. It's the way I was born, but so sometimes I have other challenges that are like socializing in a shallow way. That's more difficult for me.
Yeah. Because that's not your purpose.
It's not my purpose.
You're not wired that way. Amazing podcast interview here, everybody, with Michael DiPietro and Marcey Donnelly. It's just, thank you so much for your energy and your wisdom. This has been really fun, energetic, joyful, and I definitely feel the alignment and the synchronicity of it all. I think it's all so beautiful. Where can our viewers, our watchers, and our listeners find you if they need to get a hold of you or your book?
Thank you. Our website is the best place to get all information about the Inside Guide. It's www.loveguides.us. Because love guides us. So LOVEGUIDES.us. And there's a link to order our book on Amazon, The Inside Guide. And we really want to support the community of readers. So we have some study groups and workshops, and it's a good place. There's some online videos and materials. So it's a good place to connect.
Wow, it sounds very interactive.
Definitely, for sure.
Yeah, that's really important to us, because our mission we want to create, as Marcey said, we want to create community around this book, and we want to create a community of conscious people who want to live this every day and feel supported and feel like there's other, for years I was like, I felt like an island sometimes, but as we progress, we meet other people like yourself who are doing this kind of work, who have this orientation, and we get those synchronicities, right? And it's really joyful to share and find our tribe, so to speak, right?
Definitely.
There's people out there that are like us.
There really is. And I'm really blessed to have connected with the both of you. Thank you so much for sharing your energy and your wisdom and all of your light on A Little Less Fear podcast. And I look forward to keeping in touch and keeping a connection.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for tuning in to the Dr. Lino Show, A Little Less Fear podcast. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can do so by sending me an email at alittlelessfear@gmail.com or through an inquiry from my website at www.alittlelessfear.com, where you will always find information on where to get my book. You can get my book on Amazon and Amazon paperback version, Kindle or Kindle Unlimited. And I also create incredible visual video poetry for people that are interested in marketing, or even just to send a personal note to anybody or somebody that you might love. So yeah, check it out. I love it. Poetry is my passion, one of my other passions, aside from doing what I do right now, which is giving you all the motivation that you need to keep growing, to keep motivating people, motivating yourself, and to keep expanding. I love you all so much. Have a blessed day and take care. Rock on.